Hi everyone. Today in this video we are going to see how we can handle exceptions effectively in Spring Boot 3 using some modern approaches. And I am going to show you how we can handle the exception in Spring Boot applications as well as in Spring Boot microservices. The approach I am going to show you that is applicable to Spring Boot application as well as Spring Boot microservices. First, when the client makes a request to the controller using HTTP protocol, and this is the method signature of the controller, like it is asking for the customer for the given customer ID. Now the controller will further call the service method, and service method like in service layer we have method which will handle this case, and in case of healthy path scenarios the service method will get executed and it will return the customer object for the given customer ID without throwing any exception. So this is basically the healthy path scenario. But in case if it finds any exception in service layer, it will throw that exception to the controller. Now the exception can be thrown from the repository or service layer, or it can be thrown from the controller layer as well. But as a best practice, it should be thrown from the service layer itself. Now before we throw any exception, we first need to consider what all exceptions can be thrown from the application, and all those exceptions we need to create a custom classes for all those scenarios. Like in our case, we are going to create customer not found exception as a custom exception, and we are also going to create a customer already exist exception. So all these exceptions we need to find out first what all exceptions our application is going to throw, and for all those exceptions we need to create the custom exception classes inside our exception folder. So we need to create one dedicated folder, and inside that we need to add all these custom exceptions. Now next, the service layer will throw the exception to the controller, and the Spring will first find out the exception handler in the same controller itself. It will find for the exception handler method for that customer not found exception inside the same controller. If it finds, it will execute that exception handler method, and if it does not find, it will look for REST controller advice annotation. If it finds the class with this annotation, then it will execute the exception handler inside that REST controller advice. Like it will execute the method like this one. Inside that we are going to use ProblemDetails, which is a newly addressed class. New class has been introduced for exception handling, and which has various properties like we can set details, title, status, and property like timestamp, and it will basically create a JSON like response with all these properties. So we can create a custom response using these ProblemDetails. So in this way, it will execute this exception handler which is inside REST controller advice, and it will finally throw the exception message with all these details. This is how we can handle the exception using Spring Boot 3. Now these are some practical scenarios which we are going to implement. Like we are going to create the customer not found exception, and we are going to create a scenario wherein the service layer will throw this exception, and we are going to see how we can handle that in our REST controller advice controller class. We are going to create some exception handler methods to handle these exceptions. Next exception we are going to cover like customer already exists. This is again another custom exception we are going to create, and we are going to create one exception for general purpose like generic error to handle the generic errors with the help of exception. So these are all these three scenarios we are going to implement and test it using the Postman and see how it can show the proper error messages for all these three scenarios. So please do not forget to like, subscribe and share, and watch this from start to end, and I'm sure that this video is going to be very interesting. Now let us create one parent folder for exception handling. And we can copy this project folder. Now let us open our Spring Tool suite. And here we can copy this project folder and click on launch button. We can close this unwanted windows from right and left. And let me change the font size. Let me choose 16 so that it will look good. Fine. Now let us create our Spring Boot project using Spring Boot 3, and we can create the microservice using create new Spring Starter project. And here we can give our service name, which is customer-service. And here build type you can choose Maven. Java version we can take 21, and here for group we can say com.customer. And it's a customer project. For description we can say customer project for Spring Boot, and for package we can add com.customer. We can click on next button. Here we need to add the dependencies, like we are going to add Spring Web. We are going to use Spring Web. We require H2 dependency, H2 database. We need Spring Data JPA, and we require Lombac dependency as well. Now this much is enough. We can click on next and finish button. Now here we can see we have this application with name customer-service we have created successfully with using Spring Boot 3. Now let us create our first we can create our actual application with Spring Boot 3 with some endpoints, like we will add two get endpoints, which first get API will fetch all the customers from the H2 database. Next API we will create the new customer into the database, and there will be one more API which will fetch the customer based on the ID. So let us do that. First we can create our employee application YAML file. So here we can give name like it's an application YAML, and here we can add, like we can give some port name for this one. Let's say 8083. We can add some Spring name, Spring application name. And we can say it's a customer-service. Next we can add data source. For data source we are going to add the URL, and which is JDBC H2 meme, and here this is our, let's say, cust_db. This is related to customer database, and we can add some username. Let's say we can add any username, like let's say Sam. Next we can add password Sam@123, and next we can add our driver class name. So each database has its driver. So we can, for H2 database, we can add org.h2.driver. Next we can add H2, and we can add console. We can use enabled as a true, so that it will enable the H2 console. With this we can see our data through our browser. We can hit the URL and see the actual data into the H2 database. Now we can add one more thing, like it's a JPA, H2 JPA, and we can add Hibernate, and we can say DDL auto as an update. Next we are going to add show SQL as an true. So show SQL should be at Hibernate level, and here we can add one more property as an database platform, and we can add org.hibernate.dialect.h2 dialect, and we can save it. Now let us remove this indentation error, like we can add one by one. We can resolve this. And we are done with this. This should be at H2 level. Seems good. With this we are done with our application.yaml file, and in which we have configured our H2 database. Now let us create some packages first. So this is our main package. Now here inside that we can add entity first. Next we can add repository. Next we can add our service, and finally we can add one controller package. So what we are going to do, like we will first create some endpoint, 3 endpoints, and we can test that through Postman, and then we can add our exception handling logic on top of that. So here we can first create our entity class with name customer, and here we can add all the required annotations, like it will require all our constructors, like no OR constructors, builder, data, and our main annotation which is important for entity, which is entity. Now let us mention what all properties we are going to use, like private long id. Next we are going to use private string name, private. Next we are going to use private string email and private string let's say location. So this much is enough. Now we need to add one more thing, like we need to add id annotation, and like generated value we need to add. And we can add generation type as an auto, and we can save it. We can save. So with this we are done with our entity. Now next thing, we can create our service repository first. So we can repository, it's an interface, so we can give a name like it's an customer repository, and here we can annotate with repository stereotype. This will extends like JPA repository. Here we can add our customer and ID which is of type long. So we can save it. Now this is about repository. Now let us create our service interface first with name, let's say customer service, and inside that we can add what all things we are going to use, like it will return first method will return all customers, like we can say get customers. This is the first method. We can add required imports. Next method will create a new customer into the database, and we can say it's a create customer. For this method we need to pass a new customer. It should be create customer, not customers. We need to pass new customer as an input, which will get created into the database. Now similar way we can add one more method which will return a particular customer based on ID, and here we need to add the required ID which is a long. That's it. So these many methods we are going to implement. We can save it. Now let us create service implementer class with name customer service IMPL. Now here we can add stereotype as an service, and it should implement our service method which is customer service, and here we can add required imports for this one, and we can add all the unimplemented methods at here. Now first thing we can do, like we can auto wire our repository inside this service, and our repository name is customer repository. So we can inject this repository into our service so that we can call respective methods available on this repository. Now next thing, we can create one one constructor for this customer service IMPL. Let's say it's an public, and inside that we can add this. We need to initialize this customer repository. You can say this dot customer repository, and here we can add this. Can save it. So here we have injected or created one property which is a customer repository we have injected inside this service and we have initialized it. Now let us add respective method on this repository. Like this is the find all, which will return all the customers. Similar way, here we can call dot save method, which will save new customer into the database. And here it will return get by ID, or we can say find by ID, and here we can pass this ID. Or we can say find by, we can create instead of ID we can create one find by email method. And here we can pass string email. Now to access get customer by email, we need to define the same method inside this customer service, and instead of this we can say it should be get customer by email, and this is the input email we can pass. That's it. Now to call this get customer by email, we need to define this method inside the repository. So let us do that. So we can say this should return a particular customer, and this is the method which will take input as an email, and it will return the respective customer for the given email ID. So this method we have added inside the repository. Now same we can call from it here, get customer by email, and here we are going to pass email. That's it. We can save it. Now we are done with our customer service implementation class. Now let us create our controller, and here we can use customer controller class, which is a REST controller, and here we can inject our service method. And here we can add our get mapping first. This is the customers, and it will return all the customers. And here we can use the response entity for the return type, method name, get all customers. No need to pass any request body. And we are going to call the method on this service, which is get customers, which will return all the customers. We need to add import for list, and it should, okay, here we are using response entity, that's why we need to wrap the return type into the response entity, and we are done. Now similar way we can create one more endpoint or API which will post, or which will help to create a new customer into the database. For that it will simply return a new customer, not a list. And here we can say it's a create customer method, and it will take the request body of customer type, and this is our new customer we are going to save into the database. For that we are going to call the respective method on the service, which is create customer, and we are going to pass this new customer to be saved into the database, and we can save it. So this is about post mapping. Similar, so this method will create a new customer into the database. Now similar way we can create one more endpoint which will return the customers or email based on the email. So what email we are or we can say what email we are going to pass. Based on that it will return. We can name it get customer by email, or get customer by ID. We can type here, we can say get customer by ID, and let us add one more method for ID as well, and this is the long ID we can pass. We can create one more method, get customer by ID, so here we can use find by ID, and we can pass this ID, and it will basically return the optional, and we can save it. We need to add import for this optional, and similar way we need to change the method signature for this one. Here we need to pass @ path variable, and this is the ID which is of type long, and this is the ID attribute, and here we can call the method like get customer by ID, and we can pass this ID, and here it is returning the optional, so we need to convert it to the optional and save it. That's it. Now we have everything ready, like we have 3 APIs which first will return all the customers, second will create a new customer, and this will return a particular customer based on the ID. Now we can save it. Now let us run it and check how it goes. We need to first build our code, which will create a jar. Now build success. Now we can go to target folder and check. We need to refresh. Yes, we can see jar is created, customer jar is created successfully. Now let us run this by using run as Spring Boot app. Now here we can see our application is started successfully on port 8083. Now let us test our APIs using Postman. Let me open the Postman, and here we can use, let's say our port number is 8083. If you want to cross check, we can go to our YAML file, and this is the port number we need to use, and here for body we can use raw and JSON, and we can test it. Now it is showing no empty array because we have not added any record. So let me copy one record if possible. Okay, let us create one new record. Now we can say, first we can add name, let's say Suman. Next we can add email, and here we can add Suman email, suman@gmail.com. Next we are going to add location, and what is the location? Let's say it's a Pune, and let us try our post method and check. Yes, we can see one customer is created successfully with all these details. Now similar way we can create, if we try we can create test for get method. It is showing the same. Now let us add one more, like let's say we can add Kiran, one more record and check. and Kiran is from Mumbai. Now we have two records. If we call the get method on this, it will show two records. Seems good. Now if you want to fetch a particular record based on the ID, so we can fetch the record for ID2, customer for ID2, and it has fetched successfully. Now all these APIs are working fine. We have created 3 APIs and we have tested through Postman. Now our real part will come, like we are going to add our exception handling. So for that, first of all, for this exception handling, it is always recommended to create one new package. So let us create a new package inside this customer form.customer, and we can name it like it's an exception. Next thing, inside that we are going to create all the exception classes which we are going to use. Like, so let us create first exception class, like we can say customer already exist exception. So this is our first exception class, inside which we can add one public constructor. First of all, this exception we can add extends runtime exception, and for this constructor we can add some string message. And we can add super customer is already existed with this email. So whenever we are trying to create a new customer with the same email, that time it will show this message. And here customer already existed, we can say customer with email, and here we can pass the email address. Let's say here we are going to pass email, and the same email we are going to append it here, and we can say with email is already exist. So this is the proper message we are going to set, and we can save it. Now this is one exception. Similar way we can create one more exception. We can paste the same class, and here we can say customer not found exception. So this is the another exception we can create, and here customer not found exception, and the message customer with ID, and here we can pass the long ID, and this is the ID. Same we are going to pass customer with ID not existed, not found. So this is the message it is going to return. Now the main thing, we are going to create one controller for exception handling, specifically for exception handling, like it's a global controller. So we can create one class with name global exception handler, and here we can annotate with like as we it should be REST controller advice we are going to use, and inside that we are going to add different exception handlers. Inside that we can mention, inside this exception handler annotation we are going to mention what classes we are going to use, like let's say what exception we are going to throw, like customer we can save it first, and this is the customer not found exception. We can copy it and edit it here. So this is the exception class it will handle, and here we can give our name, like method name, which will return the response entity, and which are going to use problem details. This is the new addition to the Java 21 or with Spring Boot 3. We can use this. Basically it will customize the response format like JSON response with this problem details. Now this is the problem details, and here we can use handle customer not found, and we can use this. and this is the exception. Now here we can create our, we can copy this, we can create first problem details, and we can say problem details dot for status. And what is the status? It's an HTTP status dot, we can set not found. So this is the status we have set. Next we are going to set, this is the problem details, and we can set title. Here we can say customer not found. So this is the title we are going to set. Next thing we are going to set details. Here exception details we are going to set like exception dot, this is the message we are going to pass. Next we are going to set properties or set property, and this is, we can add some timestamps for this one, and we can use instant.now, so what time it has occurred, that we can log as well. And finally we can return our response entity. We can use status set here, and we can pass, we can copy this not found, and finally we can add body, and inside body we are going to add this problem details. So this object we can copy and pass it here, that's it, we can save it. So this is for handling customer not found, and how we are going to handle it inside this global exception handler. This is for customer not found, which will occur whenever we are trying to access some customer ID which is not existed into the database. Now similar way we can handle one more exception like customer already exists. So this is the, we can copy, and here this is the customer already exists exception. This will occur whenever we try to create a new customer for the email ID which is already there. So we need to change the status like already. For this, what status we can set? Customer already exists exception, HTTP status conflict. We can say conflict because it is already there. Next, for status we can message title, we can say already exist. Or same conflict, we can edit it here, that's it, and we can save it. So this is for whenever we try to create a new customer, handler customer. Here this is the method handler customer not found, and this is customer, you can say already exists. Similar way we can create one more exception and one more method which will handle a general exception. We can say it's a general exception or general error, so we can say generic errors. It is just exception, and here we can set like internal server error, and here we can set for status details, we can set something went wrong, or we can say contact support, that's it. And here the same status we can set it here, that's it. So we have covered 3 different exceptions. Now let us check how it works. What we have done, we have created two exception classes, and one is means custom exceptions, custom runtime exceptions, and this is our global class which will handle all the exceptions, and these are the methods which will handle all these exceptions. Now let us see how it works. Now what we are going to do, like we will first try to create one, we will test the scenarios. Like what we will do, we will pass the input in a such a way that it should throw the exceptions. So let us see one by one how it goes. Like, let me comment out this test class first. Now it's a build success. Now let us run it again, run as Spring Boot app. Something it is showing like okay, so method already exists, so I think okay, so here we should give the appropriate exception which is there, and here we can say exception dot class is, it should be generic. So here we have already defined customer already exists, so here it's a generic, we can save it. Now let us rebuild it again. And let us run it. Now seems good, it has started on port 8083. Now let us check how it goes. Now first of all, we can check for a get method. Now it is returning empty array because we are using the H2 database. So on every restart of the system, it will lose the data, it will not retain the data. So that's why it is, we are starting from a fresh. So there is no data in the database, we have restarted the application. Now let us add one entry and check how it goes. Seems good. Now it has added one entry. Now if we try to add the similar entry, it should show the message that this email is already existed. Now let us try to access the get method with the ID which is not existed. Now it is not showing any exception because we have not thrown the exception in our any of the class. Exception should be thrown from the repository or service layer, or it can be thrown from the controller level as well. But the best practice, we should throw it from the service layer. So before we throw that, let us add some getter setters for these customers. Sometimes it may or may not show the getter setters with the annotations, because we need to, okay, fine. So we have added these getter setters. Basically we need to add plugin for Lombac, then we do not need to add these getter setters, it will automatically generate, but right now we are adding explicitly. Now let us go to our service first, and this is our service. Now here, first of all, whenever we try to access some ID like customer, at that time it can throw like customer not found exception for some ID which is not existed in the database. For this, what we can do, like here we need to throw the exception. For that we can say is an optional customer, and here we can check like if this optional customer is empty, in that case we are going to throw new exception which is like customer not found exception for this ID. If everything is fine, we are going to return this optional. Now this is for when we are going to access the customer for some invalid ID, or for the ID for which the customer is not existed or not found. In that case it will throw this exception, not found exception. Like if the customer is not existed for the given ID, in that case it will throw this error. Similar way we can for creating a customer, it may throw some customer already existed error or exception. So for this we can modify the code, like this is the customer, and here first of all, before we save the customer, like we need to check like if the customer is already exist, we can use find or get customer by email, this message we can call, and here we can pass the input email to check if the customer is already existed for this email. If customer is existed for this email, then we need to throw the exception like customer is already existed, and here we can pass the same email ID. And if everything is fine, in that case we are going to return this statement. So what we have done, like while creating a customer, we may come across we have already created a customer with this email ID, and if we try to again create the customer with the same email ID, then first we are going to check whether the customer is existed for this email ID. If the customer is existed, it should throw the exception like customer already existed for this email ID, and if it has different email, then it should allow to create the customer. That's it, we can save it. Now let us rebuild it again and check how it goes. Let me close this. We can clean it first. Now let us build it and we can run it. Now let us test it again, like first we can call the get method. We have restarted the application. Now it has no data, which is as expected because we are using the in-memory H2 database. Now if we try to add a new record into the database, it will add because it's a new record. Now if we try to add the same email, record with the same email, it should throw the exception like customer with this already exist, which means it is showing the exception from the create customer class, because we are trying to attempt to create the new customer with the same email ID, and it has thrown the exception as expected. So this is for one exception. Similar way, let me create one more, like we can change the email ID, and here for location we can say Pune. It will create successfully another record. Now if I try to access the second ID, it should show the second ID, second record for this ID. Now if I try to access some ID for which the customer is not existed, so it should show customer not found, which is as expected. So that logic we have thrown from like customer get customer by ID, and it has thrown customer not found exception, which is as expected. So, and if we try to change this, like let's say if I want to add something like this one, and so this is not correct one, so it should show some generic exception, something went wrong, contact support, which is like this one. So here global exception, and this is the something went wrong, contact support, because it's an invalid syntax. Seems good. Now we have tested all the scenarios of exception handling, and this is the latest way of how we can handle the exception using the REST controller advice, and we have tested all these scenarios for these exceptions, custom exceptions. I hope you must have enjoyed. So please do not forget to like, subscribe and share, and thank you so much for watching this.